He had all the money in the world, but no one to share it with. Known as a cold and ruthless billionaire, he was a man feared by employees, hated by the public, and trapped in his own loneliness. Until one rainy night, a chance encounter with a little girl would shook his world in a way he never saw coming, and nothing in his life remained the same again. Victor Hale was a man everybody in the city knew by name, but very few truly knew at heart. He was one of the wealthiest men in America, a billionaire who had built his empire by making ruthless business decisions. People called him brilliant, but behind closed doors, they also called him cold. He was the type of boss whose presence made employees lower their eyes, afraid to speak unless spoken to. He believed kindness was nothing more than a weakness, a distraction that only made people lose in this competitive world. Victor lived in a mansion that overlooked the city, filled with luxury cars, priceless art, and everything money could buy. Yet, when he walked through those long marble hallways, the silence echoed back at him. He had no family who visited, no friends he trusted, no one he could share his triumphs or failures with. Despite having everything the world thought mattered, he went to bed every night feeling an emptiness he couldn't explain. At company meetings, Victor was known for cutting down employees who made mistakes. He'd fire someone without blinking, even if it left a family without a paycheck. He told himself it was business, not personal. But the truth was, deep inside, Victor had long forgotten what compassion even felt like. The public disliked him. His name appeared in newspapers often, but not for the kind of stories that inspired admiration. No one looked at Victor Hale as a role model. They saw him as a symbol of greed, arrogance, and isolation. And the sad part was, Victor didn't care. At least, that's what he told himself. To him, caring meant exposing a weakness. And if there was one thing he had promised himself long ago, it was that he would never be weak again. But one rainy evening, something happened that Victor could never have predicted. Something that would shake the very foundation of the walls he had built around his heart. Because on that night, a complete stranger was about to show Victor Hale a kind of wealth he never knew existed. And that stranger, she wasn't a business partner. She wasn't a powerful politician. She wasn't even an adult. She was a child, just 8 years old. What could an 80-year-old possibly do to change the life of a man like Victor Hale? That's what you're about to find out. That rainy evening, Victor's sleek black car broke down on the side of a quiet street. He wasn't in the business district or a wealthy neighborhood. He was stuck in one of the poorest parts of the city, where small houses leaned against each other, and the sidewalks were cracked from years of being ignored. Victor sat inside his car, frustrated. The rain poured heavily against the windshield, blurring his view of the dim streetlights. He checked his watch impatiently. The tow truck was running late. His phone had no service. For a man who always had control, in that moment he felt powerless. As the minutes dragged on, his anger grew. He hated waiting. He hated feeling stuck. Most of all, he hated being reminded that money couldn't always fix everything. He muttered under his breath, "This is ridiculous." And that's when he noticed her. A little girl, maybe 8 years old, walking down the sidewalk with a small umbrella that looked far too flimsy to shield her from the storm. Her sneakers were soaked, and her backpack hung heavy on her shoulders. She looked like she was heading home from the community center, or maybe a late after-school program. Victor expected her to walk past without a second glance, just like everyone else did. But she didn't. She stopped. She looked right at him. A man sitting in a luxury car, dressed in an expensive suit, but clearly upset. The little girl tilted her head as if studying him. And then, to Victor's surprise, she walked over. She tapped on the window, her small hand leaving tiny watermarks on the glass. Victor hesitated, but curiosity made him roll it down. The girl smiled shyly and said, "You look sad. Do you want my umbrella?" Victor blinked, confused. No one, not even his closest business associates, had ever offered him something without expecting a favor, a deal, or a payoff in return. Yet here was a child, offering him the only thing she had to shield herself from the rain. Before he could respond, she reached into her backpack and pulled out a napkin-wrapped cookie. "I saved this from earlier. My mom made it. You can have it. Maybe it'll make you feel better." Victor stared at the small cookie, his mind struggling to process what just happened. He had eaten meals prepared by world-class chefs in the most expensive restaurants in the country, but never had food been given to him so freely, so sincerely, without strings attached. He found himself asking, almost reluctantly, "Why are you giving this to me? You don't even know me." The girl shrugged and said simply, "Because you look like you need a friend." For the first time in years, Victor was speechless. This little girl, with nothing compared to what he had, was showing him a kind of generosity that his billions had never bought. As she handed him the cookie and umbrella, Victor felt something strange inside him, a crack in the icy armor he had worn for so long. He didn't know why, but he couldn't stop watching her walk away into the rainy night. And in that moment, Victor made a decision. He needed to know who she was. He needed to understand why someone with so little could give so much. But as Victor would soon discover, finding out who that little girl was would take him on a journey he never expected. A journey that would test every belief he had about life, wealth, and what it really means to be strong. What happens when Victor finally learns more about this mysterious little girl? Victor couldn't get that night out of his mind. He tried to shake it off, telling himself it was just a silly moment. After all, what difference could a child really make? But no matter how busy his schedule was, no matter how many deals he closed, he kept replaying her words in his head, "Because you look like you need a friend." That single sentence cut deeper than any criticism he'd ever faced. Because for the first time in a long time, Victor realized she was right. Within a few days, curiosity got the best of him. He had his driver drop him back in that same neighborhood, the one he'd normally avoid. He walked past the rundown stores and peeling paint, searching for her. And then he saw her again. She was playing hopscotch on the sidewalk, her laughter echoing through the street. A woman stood nearby, her mother, no doubt. She looked tired, worn down by life, but there was a gentleness in her eyes as she watched her daughter play. Victor introduced himself awkwardly, explaining how her little girl had helped him the other night. The woman smiled kindly and said, "That sounds like Emma. She's always looking out for others." Her name was Emma, 8 years old, living with her widowed mother in a small 2-bedroom apartment above a laundromat. Life wasn't easy for them. Her mom worked long hours at a diner just to keep food on the table, yet she always made time to teach Emma the importance of kindness. Victor found himself visiting them again and again. At first, he told himself it was just curiosity, but over time, it became more than that. Emma had this way of breaking down his walls without even trying. When he came by, she'd run up to him with a drawing she had made just for him. Crayon sketches of flowers, stick figures holding hands, sometimes even him smiling, something he hadn't done in years. At the community center, she'd proudly save him a seat beside her, introducing him to others as my friend Victor. The word friend sounded foreign to him, yet it warmed him in a way he hadn't felt in decades. He noticed how different life was in their world. They didn't have much, their furniture was old, their fridge half empty, but the home was filled with something Victor's mansion never had: warmth, laughter, togetherness. One evening, as Emma handed him a handmade bracelet she had woven from colorful string, she said, "Now you'll remember me wherever you go." Victor slipped it onto his wrist. It was simple, childlike, and yet more valuable than the gold watches sitting in his drawer. Slowly, piece by piece, Emma's small gestures began to melt the ice that had hardened his heart, and without realizing it, Victor found himself not just enjoying their company, but needing it. But life has a way of testing us when we least expect it. And just when Victor began to feel alive again, tragedy struck. One winter night, Emma suddenly fell ill. Her bright laughter disappeared, replaced by fevered coughs and hospital visits. For the first time in years, Victor felt something he never thought possible: fear of losing someone he cared about. What would he do now that Emma's life was in danger? Winter had come harsh that year. The streets were covered in snow, and the icy wind seemed to cut right through anyone who walked outside. Victor had been looking forward to seeing Emma at the community center's holiday event. She had promised to sing a little Christmas song for him. But when he arrived, she wasn't there. Instead, her mother rushed in late, her face pale and worried. That's when Victor learned the truth. Emma had fallen sick. What started as a cold had worsened into something serious. She was at the hospital, weak, coughing, and struggling to keep her bright little smile. Victor felt a rush of panic unlike anything he had known. Business deals worth billions had never shaken him. But the thought of losing this little girl, a girl who had given him nothing but kindness, terrified him. For the first time in decades, Victor realized how much he cared for someone beyond himself. He went straight to the hospital. He found Emma lying in the bed, her tiny hand clutching a worn teddy bear. When she saw him, her face lit up, even through the pain. "Victor," she whispered, "you came." That broke him. He sat beside her, holding her hand, not knowing what to say. He had faced boardrooms filled with powerful men and women, but here, in front of an 80-year-old girl fighting to breathe, he was speechless. He whispered back, "Of course I came. I'll always be here." He stayed by her bedside for hours. He canceled meetings, ignored phone calls, and refused to leave. Nurses and doctors were surprised. Victor Hale, the untouchable billionaire, was here every day, not as a businessman, but as a man desperate to see a little girl smile again. One night, when Emma's fever spiked, Victor found himself pacing the hospital chapel. For the first time in years, he prayed. He didn't know if anyone was listening, but he said quietly, "Please, don't take her away. I'll do anything. Just let her get better." And something inside him shifted. He realized that kindness wasn't weakness, it was strength. It took more courage to love than it ever did to build walls. And Emma, a child with so little, had shown him that truth.
As days passed, Emma slowly began to recover. The doctors smiled as they gave hopeful updates. Victor never left her side. He read her stories, brought her flowers, even made clumsy attempts to draw with crayons just to make her laugh. Every smile she gave him felt like a miracle. Through her, and through her mother's quiet resilience, Victor finally understood what had been missing in his life all along. It wasn't money. It wasn't success. It was love. It was connection. It was kindness. But now that Emma was on the road to recovery, Victor had a choice to make. Would he return to his old life of cold isolation, or would he step into this new life he had glimpsed? One filled with compassion, generosity, and meaning. What Victor chose to do next would shock everyone who thought they knew him. And it would prove, once and for all, that true wealth has nothing to do with money. What happens when Emma finally recovers, and how does Victor's life change forever? Weeks later, the hospital room that had once been filled with worry was now filled with laughter. Emma was recovering well, her color returning, her voice full of life again. Victor was there the day she was finally discharged. He held the door open as she skipped out, holding her mother's hand, her little backpack bouncing behind her. That moment stayed with him. He knew he had been given a second chance, not just with Emma, but with himself. And he wasn't about to waste it. Victor began changing, not in small ways, but in ways that shocked everyone around him. At his company, employees who had once walked on eggshells noticed something different. The man who used to fire people without a second thought now listened before making decisions. He treated his workers with compassion, understanding their struggles, helping instead of hurting. For the first time in years, people saw Victor smile at the office. But the change didn't stop there. Quietly, without putting his name on anything, Victor began funding projects in Emma's neighborhood. A new playground, repairs for the community center, scholarships for kids whose parents couldn't afford school supplies. He didn't want the recognition. He didn't want his name on a plaque. He just wanted to give back, the same way Emma had given to him without expecting anything in return. He even reached out to his own estranged family. Relatives who hadn't spoken to him in years because of his arrogance were stunned when Victor knocked on their doors, humbly asking for another chance. Some were hesitant, others welcomed him back. Slowly but surely, the walls he had built between himself and the people who once loved him began to crumble. But the most meaningful change was the one Emma noticed. One sunny afternoon, as Victor walked Emma home from the community center, she suddenly stopped, turned to him, and wrapped her arms around his waist. Looking up at him with her innocent eyes, she said, "You're not cold anymore." Those 4 words hit him harder than any business deal ever had. He knelt down, hugged her back, and for the first time in decades, Victor smiled a genuine, unguarded smile. A smile not born from success, but from something far greater: love. That night, as Victor sat in his mansion, he realized the house didn't feel so empty anymore. Because now, he wasn't living for himself. He was living for others. For Emma. For her mother. For his employees. For his family. For kindness. And in that quiet moment, Victor finally understood what true wealth really meant. Moral of this story: true wealth is not measured by how much money you have in the bank, but by how much kindness you carry in your heart. Because sometimes, even the smallest act of compassion, like sharing an umbrella and a cookie, can transform the coldest heart and remind us all what it means to be human. This story reminds us that even the smallest act of kindness can change someone's life forever. If it touched your heart, don't forget to like this video, subscribe for more inspiring stories, and share it with someone who could use a little hope today. Because kindness doesn't cost a thing, but it can mean everything. And remember, we're not just telling stories. We're changing lives.